Greetings and konnichiwa, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. I'm your host, Rick the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 127 here at the tavern, presented by Hirotaku.com. And today, loyal patrons, I have a very, very exciting topic for you. Yes, we are finally going to talk about Power Rangers Mythology. Don't everyone get excited at once. Chances are you have never heard of Power Rangers Mythology, and there is a very, very good reason why that is. It is actually a fan fiction series that was on geocities.com back when that was a thing, about 15 or so years ago. And how do I know what Power Rangers Mythology is? Well, dear patrons, I created it. Yes, when I was in high school, I got the idea in my head to create my own team of Power Rangers. And needless to say, it failed. It failed miserably. And today, you know what? I'm just really nostalgic about it, and I want to go ahead and talk about it. It was something that was really a failed experiment, and like most fan fiction writers, when you get bored or distracted by real life, you just kind of abandon these things. And through the magic of the Wayback Machine and a couple of interesting sources, I've been able to kind of dig up a few things from the old site, from the old series, and I just kind of want to talk about it with you guys, if not only to, kind of express what I wanted to do with the series, but just as a fun little off-topic thing amidst, the Dino Charge and the Ninja and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about something that, for me, was a real passion project that, for various reasons, I just lost interest in and never really looked back until recently. So if this is not your thing, I don't blame you. It's not that big of a deal if you want to listen or not, but if you want to hear me kind of go on about what my thoughts on fan fiction are and, what I was trying to do with my own Power Ranger team, then we'll go ahead and talk. And, I'll tell you guys what worked, what didn't, and what has changed in my perception in the last 15 years. Certainly, I feel that a lot of the elements I created were really bad. I mean, frankly, I had unoriginal ideas and two-dimensional characters or one-dimensional characters, whatever you want to go ahead and call them, and it was just overall bad. But let's just talk about it. I mean, it just seems like a lot of fun for me. I want to share it with you guys, and hey, maybe you guys can tell me you liked it, or say, hey, that's the worst piece of trash I've ever seen. So let's dig into it, and let's just kind of talk about where I kind of came up with the idea. Now, it was about this time. My family had only had internet for about 2, maybe 3 years at this point, and one of the big things on the internet at that time was fan fiction. I don't know if it's really still in play nowadays. Most of it is that bad fan fiction theater where it's obviously 10-year-olds who don't know what they're doing, or adults who never finished high school, or some crazy absurd thing. I mean, there's some really bad fan fiction out there. And again, you go to YouTube channels like Bad Fan Fiction Theater and whatnot, you'll get a good idea of exactly what I mean. Nevertheless, I thought back then it was an interesting thing, and I actually did read some fan fiction that was semi decent. I don't know if it's still around, but it was some where the Zeo Rangers meet Jetman, and there's some Zoo Ranger elements thrown in there as well, which was kind of interesting. It really wasn't that big of a thing. Also around this time, well, I mean, not 2000, but there was like 2002. There was the idea of the Time Force and Wild Force crossover before it actually happened. What people thought that was going to be. So for 2 or 3 years, there were some interesting things that were kind of coming out before the rise of YouTube and people stopped becoming interested in reading things as opposed to watching things. But one of the things I had actually noticed around this time was that some fan fiction is just stupid beyond belief. And there were a lot that I just like read the first page, was like, this is total garbage. And then there was some that had an interesting premise that started off well and then just nosedived into stupidity. And I'll give you three examples of that off the bat. One was Agony in Pink, and it's something you regret reading once you find it. I'm not going to dive into what it's about. It's just that it is the most horrible piece of Power Ranger fan fiction on the planet, and somehow it gets notoriety. I don't know why exactly, but people who don't know Power Rangers have heard of Agony in Pink, and it's really big amongst some people. So it's, but again, it was just the dumbest thing I had ever read, and I was like, oh, this is horrible. There was another one that I read, and again, this was like on the first page, and basically it was the Turbo team before the Passing the Torch episode, all getting gunned down while passing their powers on to Justin, who then sometime later recruited a new team of Rangers with him as the leader of the Power Rangers. And I know we've talked about Justin nowadays becoming a leader of the Power Rangers, but this was set in the time where he was still that unlikable character before we got to know what RPM and Megaforce was all about. And nevertheless, just any episode or anything that starts off with the four Power Rangers, including Tommy and Kat, getting murdered in front of Justin was just kind of a bad thing to begin with anyway. And then there was a third one which really had promise, which was basically Lord Zed turns the Zeo Rangers evil, and they have to recruit Jason, Trini, and Zack again to take on the powers of the Ninja Rangers and fight the Zeo Rangers. Now, again, interesting concept, but what happened there was it devolved into this thing where basically there was a scene there where Jason, in his red Ranger costume with the Tyrannosaurus helmet, merged with the Ape Ninja Zord and the Falcon Zord to form some bizarre Ape Tyranno Falcon Ultra Zord thing, and it went on from there, just the most asinine things you could think about. People just throwing things in there with no logical course. They just wanted to see something cool or describe something cool. And the reason I give you those three examples there is because those were the impetus for me creating Power Rangers Mythology. I'm like, this is trash. I can do better, which I think is a great mentality to have whenever you try to write something. It's like, this is horrible. Let me try to do something a lot better. And again, as I've stated no number of times, this is kind of what Tolkien did when he did The Lord of the Rings. He read all these books, and they're like, these are horrible. This is not the kind of stuff I want to read. I can write better, and he wrote something better. So it's basically that type of concept that I had, was like, I'm not finding the stuff that I like to read, so I'm going to go ahead and write something that I like, and I'm going to make my own team of Power Rangers. Now, at this particular time, my thought was, and again, we're talking about mid to late 2000, to give you guys more of an exact time frame of where I am at this point. Um, I had really begun to notice, and this was in the waning years of the Saban era, that there was indeed some sort of formula. It was very lighthearted, despite, of course, attempts to be serious. And of course, we got real serious once we kind of got into the Time Force era, which again was about 2001. But the idea is like, let's make something that's fun. Let's not do anything that's too out there kind of thing. Because again, we had Lost Galaxy, we had Lightspeed Rescue and military organizations. I'm like, let's do kids again. Let's go back to high school. Let's get these kids who want to be heroes and they don't take it as seriously. That was kind of my thought. Was let's have some fun with it, and not be too serious. Now, as you can tell, I'm really the exact opposite today. I do think that it needs to be taken more seriously, but at that particular time, I thought a lighthearted approach was necessary. I didn't see anything wrong with that at that particular time. So I went on to create this Power Ranger series where it was, five teenagers with attitude. So I created this team, and the impetus behind it, or not, what the design was, is that they were going to be the teenagers with traditional Power Ranger morphers, and they have traditional Zords and everything. Because I didn't like the idea of the vehicle stuff. I didn't like the idea of the organic Zords with the Galactabeasts and stuff like that. I wanted to kind of recapture the Mighty Morphin stuff, which is not unlike what Megaforce and Samurai were trying to go ahead and do. Although I'd like to think that I did it a little bit better. Not to say to my own horn, of course. Um, but the idea was, let's get 5 kids in high school and all that, and let's get them to go ahead and be Power Rangers. And I made one of the cardinal mistakes in this, was that it became, for me, kind of a self-insertion fanfic. Now, I know that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, and there's a lot of different ways to think about it. I mean, honestly, how many of you have sat there and thought to yourself, man, I'd love to be a Power Ranger. This is what I would do. This is how I would do that situation. If only I had a morph or a Ranger key, what would I do with these powers? I'm sure all of us have had them. We've all had daydreams and fantasies. I mean, I'll tell you guys right now, I've had fantasies that, I'm Aka Red and I'm leading the Ranger Key army against the Dominion and the Cardassian forces. I mean, that's a pure fantasy right there, and I think we've all had something similar to that, whether it's, Doctor Who and Power Rangers or Jurassic Park and Power Rangers or something. Everybody's had some sort of fantasy involving Power Rangers and probably involving themselves in the title role of the character, and there's nothing wrong with that. But when you put it on paper and sell it to everybody, it's just kind of annoying a little bit, because in that context, people are like, oh, this person thinks they're so self-important. They think they're, the greatest person ever. Because we do tend to make a Mary Sue type of characters and all that. And there's nothing particularly wrong with that in of itself in your head. But when you start sharing it with other people, it does seem to grate on them. Simply because people typically tend to write their heroes to be 100% perfect, because it is themselves and they don't want to see fault in themselves. But when I actually did this, I did create myself as the Red Ranger, as the leader, but honestly, I did put some of my faults in there, and that I was obsessed with Power Rangers at the time. Not much has changed, obviously. And that I did put myself a female love interest in there, but I never really got the girl in the series, and I'll tell you guys kind of more about that as we go on. So let's actually talk about the Mythology Rangers. And that's what I call them. I call them the Mythology Rangers, or the Myth Rangers. Myth Rangers was kind of the term that I had used for the most part, but Mythology was the overall the idea there. And as you will notice, this is years before Mystic Force and Magi Ranger. And I'm actually going to point out that there were some design similarities. Not them saying that either Disney or Toei ripped me off, but it is kind of odd when I go ahead and think about it. So basically, the plot is that we have 5 teenagers with attitude from my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, and I did put that in there. And actually, when I wrote this, I put in actual markers of, this is a real street, this is a real place. I think the only place I put in there that was not real was the high school. I made up an actual high school, and then again, I'll talk kind of about that here in a bit. And so we had the 5 teenagers, and it starts with my self-insertion character named Rick. And Rick basically, he goes around and meets his friends, and through what I can't remember the exact circumstances, is that he finds a set of morphers, where basically they're just like the Mighty Morphin morphers, and they have the coins in them. And when you press the button, the coins are blank. When you press the button, it will take an image of whatever it sees, basically, and adapt a power based on whatever it is. Because I needed to be able to explain where we get these mythological animals, because the source of these morphers was extraterrestrial. They were made by aliens, and I'll get into kind of the whole backstory and what I was ultimately going for the story. And I knew if they were coming from outer space, I couldn't necessarily have them, with dragons and animals and all that kind of stuff that we have nowadays, or in our mythology, basically. So I kind of have the BS thing where, if it has a picture of something, it can copy that and derive powers from it. And that's basically what I did. So basically, my characters would get holomorphers, and they had what I call the mythology book, which was a children's book of mythological creatures and pages that describe what they are. They would pick their creatures from the book, scan them, and then they would have their powers and zords and everything based on that motif. It was a very lazy way of doing it, and I completely admit that, but it got my story going because I didn't want to get too much into the backstory or necessarily create something something that would have a lot of questions to it. So that's basically where I started with the characters, and now I want to go into each of the characters that I had. So as stated, the Red Ranger is me, is Rick basically, and the character is pretty much me at that time. Somebody who's obsessed with Power Rangers, unlucky with girls because, geez, me in my high school career, me and girls just never got along. And somebody who was just very enthusiastic and very energetic about everything that he was doing. The idea was that the other characters weren't really interested in being Power Rangers, but through circumstance, they were involved in the situation, and Rick was the character that was going to bring them all together because of his love of Power Rangers. And Power Rangers was a fictional television show in this universe, so it is the real world. Power Rangers TV show, and my characters took up the moniker of Power Rangers based on that. Basically, if like somebody got Superman powers today, they would put on a Walmart Superman costume and call himself Superman, and then get sued by DC. Nevertheless, that was kind of the idea, and my character was going to be this, he's kind of the geek. He's got some cool qualities and all that. He played football just like I did at the time and everything. But he was meant to be the strong leader, the confident guy, the guy who did look at this situation and go, this is what I've always dreamed of. This is the thing I wanted to go ahead and do. I finally get to be a Power Ranger, protect the people I care about, and get to wear, a spandex costume doing it. Along with that, his motif is the dragon, and he does have a sword, so nothing really creative there. I always kind of felt that certain weapons up to this point were supposed to be for certain rangers. The dragon was supposed to always go to the Red Ranger. The sword was always supposed to go to the Red Ranger and all that. Heck, when Wild Force introduced the Yellow Ranger with sword, I was like, really? That's different. So again, I was really kind of in that mold that every Red Ranger must have a sword. And again, up to that point, that's pretty much what I was. Every Red Ranger did have a sword, so I just followed the formula, put my character with a sword. The next character is based off my dear friend Jimmy Carroll. Now, Jimmy and I actually go way back to first grade, and we actually bonded over Power Rangers. So I thought of a natural character for my series would be my best friend Jimmy. Um, and just to know what you're seeing here, of course, with the rotating pictures, you'll notice that Jimmy in these pictures has blonde hair. He actually has dark brown hair, but through the image I sent the artist, she actually thought he had blonde hair and drew him that way. I never corrected her on doing that. And he was kind of annoyed by it, and 15 years later, he's still kind of annoyed by it. But I just thought it was kind of funny. Now, Jimmy, I was playing up as the loyal sidekick, and basically he was the Samwise Gamgee. When everybody else was kind of doubting, he follows his friend through thick and thin. He was always the first to volunteer anytime that Rick came up with a plan or a solution or anything like that. He was always going to follow Rick into battle. His weapon was a shield. I thought it would be pretty cool because I'd actually designed the character of Jimmy for another series I was doing, my own original superhero team, which is a story for another time, and I gave him a shield in that, so I thought I'll give him a shield in here. And I thought it was very reflective of his personality that he is the protector. He is going to protect everybody. I looked at him as that kind of, that big character in the show that always, is big and strong but gentle heart and all that. That's the character of Jimmy that I had in my mind because that's the type of friend he was for me. So that's how I designed him, and that's what I wanted to do with him. And as you will notice in these images, yes, he is the Green Ranger, and he has a Minotaur as his spirit animal or whatever and all that. Which, again, I remind you, predates Magi Ranger by about 5 years. So, did Magi Ranger and Toei steal my idea? Maybe. Who knows? I just find it very interesting that's what they decided to go ahead and do in that series after I had done it. Because as soon as I saw Mystic Force, like, that looks familiar. But frankly, they have much better helmet design and overall suit design than I could have ever come up with. Something else about Jimmy, and this is something that comes up when I'll do the episode analysis for the things I did right, is that he did have this kind of complex of when he fails hard in his mind, beats himself up over it. And frankly, that was a trait that I kind of had for myself, but it was because of the way everything was being written and everything, and I was focusing more on my character. Once I got to writing an episode about Jimmy, I wanted to give him kind of that characteristic because he may be loyal, but he still has doubts about his abilities, and that's why I wanted to go ahead and put in there. Now, of course, it should have been my doubts or Rick's doubts as a leader of the team, but I didn't put my character in that situation at that particular point. So that's kind of what happened. So I didn't really mean to make Jimmy to come off as, bad or anything. That's just kind of the way it is, and we'll talk more about that when we get into his episode. Next, we have the Blue Ranger, Nick, modeled after somebody I knew in middle school by the name of Nick Patterson. Now, Nick, when I knew the real Nick, he was in middle school and he was the cool guy and all that kind of stuff. In middle school in Kentucky, between say 1996 and 2000, there was this kind of redneck image that was really popular. And yes, I know rednecks in Kentucky, that's something, but the thing about Louisville is we always looked at ourselves as the city. We never looked at ourselves as the country and all that. But the thing with my friend Nick at the time is that he lived in the city, but it was like he lived on a farm. I remember he had like chickens in his backyard and stuff like that, and he had this kind of real twangy accent and stuff. I mean, you put a cowboy hat on him, and we did. He actually looked like he came from the farm and all that. And he was an interesting guy. I mean, I don't know whatever happened to him and stuff, but the images always has that he was the cool guy. He had this redneck persona. The girls all loved him and stuff like that. And I thought to myself, that's a character, that's a guy who would never, ever, ever want to be a Power Ranger. That's just not something he's interested in. If he became a superhero, I don't think he would have much interest in being. He's very nonchalant about things. So what happens if we take that cool redneck and make him into a Power Ranger? How would he deal with that particular situation? And so I wrote the character to be kind of a foil for the Rick character, the guy who's always doubting, who's not really interested in what's going on. It's like, screw you guys, I'm going home kind of mentality, which frankly I think Nick kind of had a lot of the times. I mean, really he was kind of a player with the girls and stuff, and I also wrote the character like that. So my friend Nick at the time, and the Nick in the Power Rangers mythology, the Blue Ranger, was pretty much the same character in a lot of ways, but I did soften him up a little bit to make him a little bit more likable. Then I think more people would accept him, because I think if I wrote him as he was and as I have been told he was during those years, I think he would have been an unlikable character, but I had to make him accept the situation and change a little bit, and I had an entire episode kind of dedicated to him changing, and we'll get into that. His motif in this was that he was the gargoyle, because back then and still now I'm really into the gargoyles, and I really wish that they never did the Goliath Chronicles and they actually did something, good, basically. So basically his whole motif was that he was based off of the Goliath model but blue and all that. And I gave him an axe. I called it the Goyle Axe, which is the dumbest name of anything, but that's what I gave him. And no, it did not change into a can. It was just your standard, one-bladed axe. So if I had a chance to kind of go back and redesign the whole thing, I would make it a little bit cooler, but not necessarily the way it was. And you'll see in the picture that's not as impressive, at least from the way I described it to the artist. Our Yellow Ranger was a girl by the name of Shernika, based off a girl I knew named Shernika Mays. And no, that's not a made up name. That was truly her name. And this was at a time where, that was kind of common. I don't think anybody ever, made complaints about the unusual names and stuff like that. But people accepted it, and of course, I think in the stories in real life, we call her Nika for short, and I think in the couple of the episodes I wrote, we did refer to her as Nika. Now, Nika was supposed to be the kind of gentle mother type in the series. The idea was that she was very calm, she was very sweet, she was very helpful, but she was very athletic because, well, in real life she played basketball and all that. In the series, I made her play basketball as well. And the idea you got this physically strong person who is essentially a pacifist and is a very caring person. It's kind of like if you took Sarah Michelle Wee and put her in the role of just this, motherly person, but just happens to be very, very physically built, but doesn't want to use her natural gifts for anything significant, basically. Which is not anything negative to her, but the idea was to kind of open her up to take her happy nature and use it in a more constructive way. And I gave her this backstory about her mother disappearing and all that, or being abandoned. I forget exactly what it was, and I have no idea where I was going with that plot point. But just give her kind of a tragic element to where, she's like breaking inside, but on the outside, this is what her facade is that she does have these emotional problems, but she is being strong for everybody else. She doesn't want to let on that she was, hurting inside. And so her animal was the Pegasus, and it was, like a real winged Pegasus and all that. Her weapon was the Pegasus baton, so it was kind of based on, because Wild Force came in about 2002, so this design actually predated that. I don't know where I kind of got, even Gal Range, I was 2001, but I don't know where I kind of got that idea for it or where the design came from. Oh, I remember. It was supposed to be a staff, but it was turned into a baton in the artwork, so that was actually a mistake, so I'm remembering it all wrong. Yeah, it was supposed to be a staff, much like Donatello's bow from Ninja Turtles. That was what it was supposed to go ahead and be. So she was supposed to have this non-lethal weapon to better reflect her personality because she was not a lethal character at all. But the idea through a series is we were going to kind of push her to her limits. But unfortunately, that never happened. And finally, we have our Pink Ranger, Michelle, based off a girl I knew in high school called Michelle Cooper. Now, the real life Michelle was, well, first of all, she was dating the real life Nick. So they were always the couple and stuff, and she was the popular girl. She was a cheerleader. Everybody loved her. She was a cheerleader in high school, I found out. Eventually, I think she coached cheerleading or something. All these people I've lost contact with for the most part, except for Jimmy, at least on Facebook. Um, and she was supposed to be, the popular girl who got wrangled into this. And that was the whole idea, is they got people who would not be interested in being Power Rangers or suited for being Power Rangers thrown into the mix. Because unlike things like, say, Mystic Force, where you have to prove your worth as a Power Ranger, they all became Power Rangers by accident. They didn't earn it. They weren't supposed to be the Power Rangers. It was, again, just a big accident. And they have to really kind of live with the situation and do what they can to, well, save the world, basically. And Michelle, again, I looked at her as a person who would never be interested in being Power Ranger, so I turned her into one. And truth be told, I had a crush on Michelle Cooper during middle school and all that. Everybody knew that and stuff. Um, and so I, was going to write into the story that my character had a crush on her, that he was very awkward around her and stuff, but, he was going to protect her and everything. And there was the possibility of a future romance between the two, and I'll get into that again here in a little bit. But to be honest, she didn't have much character development. She was just kind of supposed to be the popular girl that everybody wanted to, be like or be with or whatever and stuff like that. And that was kind of the end of her character development. She is the Pink Ranger. She is based on the Phoenix, and she had bow and arrow because, again, at that time, I thought the girls were supposed to have bows and arrows. But again, that is changed in the last 15 years, of course. So that's the rundown of the five Power Rangers I created. So Rick, Jimmy, Nick, Shanika, and Michelle. So interesting group of Rangers to start off with, and I'll tell you where we took their personalities. The Zords were always kind of a tricky thing to go ahead and do. The origin of the Zords is tied into a subplot that I had going on where basically my team of Rangers had no mentor, they had no secret base or anything like that. They meet in each other's houses, they would meet at school. They had no place to go ahead and go. So they were really, it was the blind leading the blind. They had no idea what they were doing. So I wrote this subtext about this computer guy who went in there to help them by sending them cryptic messages over the internet through emails and various other methods. And I'll get into this character a little bit more. But part of this was is that this mystery character was providing them with Zords, because if you have no command center, no mentor, where the hell are you supposed to go ahead and get Zords? Now, I did not have the idea in my mind to actually turn them into the Zords like in Kaku Ranger, Magi Ranger, but I decided to have the Zords come out of nowhere, basically. So, of course, the Red Ranger, he had Dragon, and it was your typical, dragon with two arms and the wings, very European style type of dragon. My Green Ranger had a Minotaur Zord. Blue Ranger had a Gargoyle Zord, which again, my design was based off Goliath and whatnot. Then we had Shanika with the Pegasus, which was definitely a lot different than the concept of the Pegasus from Die Ranger, where this one actually did have wings. And if I had to give a modern comparison, it was probably more like Bright Star and Catastros from Mystic Force, before there was a Mystic Force or Magi Ranger, or if you want to get more obscure, more like the mechanical horses from the Galaxy Ranger cartoon series of the 1980s. That was kind of the idea for that. And then, of course, the Phoenix, which in my mind was always going to be kind of more or less designed like the Firebird Thunder Zord from the second season, or from Die Ranger and all that. And the transformation, that was the hardest part to go ahead and write, because I had no idea what I was doing for that either. But basically what it was is that the dragon was basically Megatron's ultimate transformation form. I think it was the Transmetal 2 form that he had from the Beast Wars, where his left arm was basically the dragon head. So the idea was that I think it was the Yellow Ranger and the Green Ranger Zords would become the legs, and the dragon would put into there with the left or right arm being the dragon's head. The Gargoyle Zord would turn into a claw fist kind of thing and be the left or right arm, and the Pink Ranger Zord would actually break up into multiple pieces and become armor for the chest, torso, and legs to give it a multicolor scheme, basically, to where it was almost like translucent pieces, to where you can almost kind of see through them, but of course, it was just additional armor to kind of spice it up. Taking what they did with the pterodactyl dinosaur, and instead of making just chest plate, it's armor for everybody, is what I was trying to do with it. The artist rendition that you're seeing was a little close to design, but I wasn't really able to get exactly what I wanted, because I really didn't have a exact design in my mind, basically, or something I can give clear marching orders for in the development of it. But I actually spent a lot of time in the stories trying to come up with a unique Megazord map of traditional Zords, but something that would be easy to transform if it was like ever a toy or something. That was kind of the way I was taking it there. And I didn't have time to develop any new Zords of the series. I had some ideas, which again I'll get into. But that was pretty much it. They just had the one Megazord, and most of the time I did write the stories for them to fight individually as opposed to the Megazord, because one of those were just a lot more interesting. To be honest, I always like it when individual Zords fight as opposed to the Megazord. I mean, if you got 5 or 6 Megazords fighting at the same time, that's cool. But 5 or 6 individual Zords fighting, that's always cool as well. Now let's actually talk about our villains in the series, because first of all, here's the one thing I did do that I do find a little annoying in most television shows, if not all, and something I wanted to really not do in mine. Excuse me. So, in a lot of television shows, Power Rangers included, we get the point of view of the heroes and the point of view of the villains, meaning that we see what the Rangers are doing, but then we see what Lord Zed's up to. We see what Master Vile is up to. We see what King Mondo is up to, and what they plan on doing to attack the Rangers. And I don't always find that particularly interesting. Now, when you have interesting villains, like, say, Rio and Melee, then yeah, I'd like to kind of see what they're up to because they're really good at what they're doing, and their own internal politics and squabbling is very interesting. One of the things I love about Lightspeed Rescue is what they did with the villains towards the end, where they had the rivalry between Olympus and Diabolico, and Queen Banshira going nuts. Basically, that was very interesting to me. But I didn't find a lot of shows were justified in showing the villains simply because a lot of the villains are not always that interesting, and I don't want to know what they're up to. I want to be in the point of view of the Rangers and be surprised on what's happening. I want to see what they're doing and everything. I want to. I mean, I don't want to see what they're doing. I want to see what the Rangers' reaction is. I mean, how much more interesting would it be if the whole Dark Ranger thing, when we had Lord Zed, wasn't based on kidnapping Tommy and draining his powers, where we find out all the information as the Rangers go along. Or just take any story where we, the audience, already know what's going to happen to the Rangers and eliminate that completely. Like, if you went and re-edited Power Ranger episodes without the villain plots in there, how much more interesting would they be? Because you don't know what's going on. That was my whole point. So when I wrote the villains, I only wrote them from times they interacted with the Rangers. We never got to see them on their starship. We never got to see them planning or say, this is what we're going to do today. I always left it as a mystery so that the reader, along with the Rangers, could figure out what's going on piece by piece and put it together. There was one exception that I had in there, but it had to do with the story, and I'll tell you guys what that is. So who was my big bad for the series? He was a bad guy by the name of the Sovereign. Now, the Sovereign is actually a character I've had in my mind for long before I even did Power Rangers Mythology, because I had this idea of this royal, regal character dressed in black who is always, proper and deadly at the same time. So the character of the Sovereign is basically this guy who is very polite, very nice, and all that, but he is the most ruthless dictator, evil villain you could ever imagine, basically. Now, he doesn't really get a lot of screen time or story time within the series, and that's by the fact there was only 10 episodes, and that I introduced him in the 7th episode, and we didn't see him again after that point. I was going to explore the character a little bit more, but I didn't get beyond his one appearance. So there isn't much in terms of what actually happened in the story, other than he presents himself to the Rangers as somebody who is, I'm not going to get down in the dirt and fight with you guys. I got other people to go ahead and do that. And somebody who is, again, very regal, very elegant. Kind of a, I guess Prince John is the thing that kind of comes to mind when I think about that. That's kind of the idea that I guess you need to have in mind to understand this character. But he did have two generals at his aid, Vilex and Shiar. Now, Vilex, again, I'm not going to say that Toei stole anything from me, but he was kind of what a proto Korag, in the idea that this is a character who is very chivalrous, has a honorable mentality to him. And actually, what the idea I had designed for him is that he is this alien with fangs who is in this black, chic, shiny armor with a sword and shield, but his armor is encrusted with gold, and his black armor is encrusted with gold and jewels to make him shiny. Because I didn't want a character who was like dark and menacing and all that. I wanted him to have a bright, colorful outfit, because I wanted him to feel that this is what nobility is, to show off these jewels, to show off your wealth and power and all that. I actually had kind of a disagreement with the artist in creating Vilex, simply because she didn't understand why I wanted to do that. Why don't you put like skulls on, or make him in black, evil looking character and stuff? I was like, no, that's not what he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be this noble villain. And that's the character that I wrote for him. And she drew it to the best of her abilities from my request, but I don't think she fully understood what the character was. And frankly, we didn't get to discover much of him in the series because, again, how short it was. But it was always meant to be this royal, regal type of character who fought in honorable combat. And then he did have a sidekick because I had my mind Scorpion and Goldar type of dynamic here. And the secondary villain there was a woman by the name of Shiar. Now, she was going to be basically just like Violex, with suit encrusted in golds and gems because she was supposed to be his lackey, kind of like the Squire Squire and the Knight. Basically, was the idea behind those characters. I wasn't delving really into a lot of medieval chivalry kind of stuff, but that was the stuff I had in the back of my mind when I was creating these concepts. She didn't get any development within the series. I think she was in there a couple of times against the female characters because, well, that's just what you do, and that was the trap I fell into in my early writings. So again, no development really for her within the series. The foot soldiers that I designed for the series was supposed to be these genetic abominations called the Liz. And they were supposed to be these lizard creatures with red eyes that shoot lasers out of their eyes. Because the whole backstory for the Sovereign was that he was a master of genetic engineering, not unlike the founders from Deep Space Nine. And that he created the Liz from genetic material, and that the only people who were not clones or genetic creations were Violex and Shiar, and that he just created his entire army, and that's what made him dangerous, was that he was a master cloner, basically. So think of the Camino cloners from Star Wars, but put into a single person with evil intent, basically. That was the idea, and that the monster of the day would be some sort of mutated genetic anomaly based on something. But also, you know what? I was not very creative at creating monsters because I wanted to get something unique, but I didn't really have the imagination for it, in all honesty. So I also made this little plot point where he's not very imaginative, the Sovereign is. So he'll actually take monsters from popular culture and make them real. And that was an episode that I did, and it's the dumbest thing ever. But I basically took one of the monsters from Lightspeed Rescue, the Freeze monster, from that series, and said that he created him genetically based on the design from the series. And I only did that so I didn't have to describe the monster. I could just say the monster from Lightspeed Rescue, we already know his powers, and then I could actually talk about the story I wanted to, which was a Jimmy story, without having to get into that stuff. And I think I made two or three originally created monsters, but man, my imagination was very limited when it came to creating monsters. So yeah, I really kind of did something bad right there. But again, I don't think anybody really cared. Nobody really said anything, and I'll talk about what comments I had on the series as well. Um, so I'm going to go over. I wrote 10 episodes of the series. Now, don't bother trying to find them because, again, it was on GeoCities, and GeoCities closed back in '09, and they deleted everything. I was able to find the episode list that I created with the Wayback Machine, but the files themselves are lost to time, and, probably the better for it simply because I know what I wrote back then, and I was not good at all at writing at that time. I mean, I like to write, and again, I did this stuff, but I just wasn't really good at it, which is probably why I wasn't accepted into the creative writing class in my high school. Nevertheless, 10 episodes were written, and I don't remember all the details of all of them, but I want to kind of go through the list with you guys on what these episodes were, what they were about, where it ended, and then I'm going to tell you the things I had planned with the series and what just never came to fruition. So, episodes 1 and 2 were called The Might of Myth, parts 1 and 2, respectively. So, it basically starts with Rick finding the morphers in the series, finding that they have magical powers, and that he's being pursued by the villain of Violex. And Violex basically lets them in on a thing that he wants them for his master, the Sovereign. Because at this point, I didn't give the Sovereign motivation, but in the back of my mind, basically what it was is that the Sovereign wants the Morphers for their mystical powers. That again, he uses genetic technology to achieve his goals, but to ensure lasting victory against his enemies, which I believe I called the Horta. I don't know if that's a copyrighted thing or not, but that's what I called them. That he needed the morphers. And when the Rangers activate the morphers, it's like the Dino Gems. Again, before the Dino Gems was a thing, that it bonded with you, and that the only way that you could extract the power at that point would be to kill the person who has the power. So throughout what happens is that each of the Rangers bonds with the Morpher. Vilex realizes after he can't get the Morphers that now we have to go ahead and kill them, and tries to kill them, but the Rangers prove too strong and drive him off. I'm sure I wrote more to it than that, but that's what I remember. And a lot of it was the roundup scene, how each of the characters got involved, how they picked their different animals, their motivations for picking the mythical creatures and whatnot, and just ultimately fighting Violex and the Liz. And at this point, I didn't even write a Megazord because you know what? I wanted to take time with my series. I didn't want them to have a Megazord in the very first episode. That was something I wanted to wait till later. The third episode that I wrote is called First Battle, which I know it sounds like a samurai or super samurai title, and it does sound like a first episode, so maybe I could have used the third episode as the first and confused everybody and had the Might of Myth at the end of the season, but no, I'm not joking about any of this. I really had the third episode called The First Battle and all that. And that was the idea of that one was this is where the Rangers actually come together as a team, where Rick is able to inspire them and talk them into actually becoming a team of Power Rangers. Because in the first two episodes, it was, they were very reluctant, but they were able to fight him off anyway, and they kind of go their separate ways at the end. But then he's like, no, we have to work together to be the Power Rangers. And that was what that episode was about. I can't really remember what else was going on in it, but that was the main thing that I had going on. The fourth episode that I wrote was called Yeehaw. And yes, so as I said, Nick was supposed to be the resident redneck, so it was about him. It was about the character of Nick going on a camping trip because he was really excited to go out there and shoot some deer with his buddies and all that. And what I wanted from this episode was to point out that he was not against killing, that he would kill an innocent animal and stuff like that. And that through the episode, and again, I don't remember exactly what I wrote, he would come to respect life. And at the end of the episode, he would see a deer and choose to let him go and let him not shoot him just for the sport of it. Now, I am against hunting for the sport of it. If you're going to kill an animal to eat it, I get that. That's fine. But just because it's fun and you want to kill something, I'm not for that. And I really kind of wrote that into the episode where Nick goes against his friends because he wants to preserve life. How he got there was pretty weak, as I remember, it was just a monster attack, and the monster was killing deer or something like that. I can't remember the full details. And he's like, that's, wanton destruction with no rhyme or reason, so it's horrible, blah 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 and stuff. As I said, it was very poorly written, and that's something that I did. I'm just kind of like, even I kind of gagged at the end of it. I was like, man, I made it schmaltzy at the end, didn't I? So yeah, that was probably my first bad episode that I truly disliked. The fifth episode was entitled Mission Megazord. Now, this is where our mysterious character comes in for the first time. He sends an email to Rick that he reads, and basically it's this encrypted, message and stuff where it's basically saying, you will have help soon, blah, 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 you need this. And it's the first time that a giant monster actually attacks our heroes. I don't remember the method in which the monsters grew. I don't know if I even wrote one in there, but they, get the Zords for the first time, and they form the Megazord for the first time. And that's basically what the story was. It was mainly there to introduce the Megazord and to introduce the subplot of a mysterious character who is aiding the Power Rangers when they absolutely have no direction going on. Number 6 was an episode titled Mean Green. Now, Mean Green was a Jimmy episode. And basically, the other four Rangers are captured, and Jimmy feels it's his fault that they were captured by the aforementioned Lightspeed Rescue monster. So he beats himself up over it, but through something, and I can't remember exactly what it was, he gains the courage to fight the monster, defeats him, and destroys the monster on his own, before and saves the Power Rangers. And that's something I also put in the show that you really don't see a lot in a lot of Power Rangers episodes or even Sentai, is that a single character defeats the monster on their own without the help of the Rangers, and it doesn't escalate into a monster battle. Yeah, we'll see Takashi defeat a monster using the Hyper Resha and all that, but then we have a battle with the Megazord where it involves all the Megazords, or maybe just one Megazord, and the whole team becomes involved with it. And actually, the episode I'm referencing right now does have just Takashi do it in the Megazord, so that's probably not the best example to use, but you all get my point, is that rarely do we have one ranger fight him and then that's the end of it and there's no Megazord battle. That's what I was ultimately going for in that particular story, was to give character development for Jimmy, but again show that one ranger is strong enough to beat one villain on his own. Number 7 was a really interesting one for me because it's where we introduce the Sovereign for the first time. The Rangers get a warning from their cyber informant, and again, I can't remember what his name was or was supposed to go ahead and be in here. Oh, and by the way, I just remembered it looking at some of my notes here. I also had a cameraman and a news reporter that was supposed to be in there, and I don't remember their names at the moment. They were supposed to go ahead and help the Rangers at some point, and they were really superfluous. I guess they were my answer to Bulk and Skull, and I did absolutely nothing with them. I shouldn't even mention them, but it's in there, and that's what I did, so yeah, that was something. But in this episode, they get a message from the hacker that they're going to be attacked by the Sovereign, because the whole idea is that he knows things are going to happen and tries to warn the Rangers and help them best he could. Unfortunately, the Rangers all get sedated with tranquilizers, go dark, and then they wake up tied to chairs at this big banquet buffet aboard the Sovereign ship, with him at the head of the table sampling different types of Earth food that he has been able to go ahead and acquire. Basically showing that, one, he does have access to the planet, two, he has this massive ship at his command, and three, he knows who the Rangers are and basically wants to meet them face to face. And the whole thing is really just posturing by everybody, unfortunately, because I couldn't write good dialogue for them. And he's just kind of taunting them, hey, you're going to fall before me, so why don't you just give up now, and I'll take the morphers and kill you, and I'll spare the rest of humanity. Because, much like the Transformers, the Rangers and Earth are kind of caught in the middle of this. The whole idea is that the Morphers came to Earth somehow, and I don't even remember why they came to Earth from what I wrote, is that they came to Earth and he's after them, and they got involved in the situation, and now they've put Earth in jeopardy. And he's like, you know what? I'll drop everything if you just sacrifice yourselves. I'll leave Earth forever and never come back. My fight is with the Horta, and you know what? Let's just call it a day. That was basically his approach. He was trying to be very diplomatic to it, but of course the Rangers aren't going to go ahead and die, and they know that he's done some evil things and is capable of evil things, especially using genetic technology for negative consequences and all that. So he gets really pissed off and starts yelling at him because I always looking at this guy, it's like, keep this cool. It's like, yeah, I'm cool and all that stuff. And then somebody pisses him off, he just flips the switch and goes crazy on you. And they basically get out of their constraints and they're able to get off the ship by teleporting. Because, yes, I used teleporting in the series. No rhyme or reason. I just had teleporting. And they leave. And they meet the enemy and, like, okay, we got to do something about this. And I don't remember what they did about it because, again, the series is almost over at this point. But this is where I did have one little scene at the end. It was kind of an epilogue scene where it was from the villain ship. The Sovereign is conversing with Violix, and he's basically saying, did you get what I need? And Violix is like, yes. And he goes, good. Now start phase 1. And we don't know what phase 1 is. I know what phase 1 is, and I will tell you that once we get into my future plans for the series. But that was the only time I ever did it from the villain's perspective, just to leave that little dangling, what's going to happen next for my readers. Episode number 8 was called Fall and Attack. I have no idea what I wrote in this episode. It's a very generic title, so I don't know what to say about it, guys. I don't remember it in the slightest. Maybe it had something to do with Shanika. I think I wrote some episode with her in there as the starring role, but I honestly could not tell you. So yeah, that was that. I don't remember what that episode was at all. The ninth episode that I had was called Archer. Now, the reason it's called Archer is because it's named after the high school that the teens all go to, which is named Archer High School, thus named after Captain Jonathan Archer from Star Trek Enterprise. Because believe it or not, I really did like Enterprise, and I liked Archer, I liked Bakula, and this is before I even knew what Quantum Leap was. So I decided to name it after him. I made this fictional high school instead of using a real one in the city, and I thought of the great idea. They're going to be their school colors are ice blue and white, and they're the polar bears. And I just thought that was the greatest idea ever because no high school has ever done that, and I thought that was sweet. But the episode is basically the teenagers' first day of high school, and they all go to high school. Um, and I don't remember much beyond that. And that Rick and Jimmy both played football, and they had a football game later that night. And basically, it was a monster attacking the football game. And what I wanted to do is instead of making all the characters kind of run away, and that's what happens in a lot of these stories, is that the characters run away from danger, or the civilians, not the Rangers. I thought it would be a great scene. And I was well into playing my second year of high school football at this time. I wrote in there basically the monster attacks, but of course Ricky and Jimmy don't have time to go ahead and morph, so they just put on their helmets and charge at the monster to try and take him out. And that the other football team, the other members of the football team, and the opposing team, um, both join in and they start attacking the monster together. But of course, the monster overwhelms them and they can't fight him. But the idea was that everybody would join in to stop this evil threat. That was the idea I had in mind. Um, and basically, the episode ends with Nick calling his Gargoyle Zord in a moment that I don't think I've ever seen in Sentai or Power Rangers. But basically, he's in his Gargoyle Zord. He picks up the monster with his Zord's hand and crushes him in his hand, and he blows up. That's the end of it. The crowd and everybody cheers, and yeah, because that isn't that something they should do? Call the Zords, pick up the monster, and crush him. You know that's what I would do, and that's what I did. I just thought that was a great idea there. Now we come to the final episode called Premonitions. Now Premonitions was basically my season cliffhanger, and I was setting up what I was going to do for the next season. Season using a loose term and all that. So basically, the Rangers get this cryptic message while at the same time Shanika is having hallucinations. Now, the cryptic message is in a language nobody can go ahead and decipher, and I actually did write this out, and I'll tell you about it here in a second. But the first line would be like some cryptic thing that was translated in English. The idea is they would have it in this alien language, and that over time it would actually translate into English. And this was also sent by our mysterious person who knows of future events. But Shanika somehow is receiving images from the future, and all she is seeing is death and destruction, the Megazord being destroyed, the Rangers being killed, and the scene of Ricky and Michelle making out in front of a large explosion until they are killed. Not unlike that scene from Watchmen, both the comic and the movie, where our Night Owl character and Silk Spectre are making out before that explosion. They're naked in their costumes or whatever. That was before I even knew what Watchmen was. And I actually had a picture commissioned that I put in with the episode file, but that file and that picture are both gone, so I don't have that for you guys anymore. So the idea is that the secret message and Shanika's premonitions were tied together to where she could understand what was going to happen and try to let the others in on what was going on. And the cliffhanger was is that she draws the image of Ricky and Michelle making out and about to die, and she goes, "This is going to happen soon. Dun, 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 to be continued." And that, my folks, is the end of Power Rangers mythology. I wrote the first episode on November 24th, 2000. Well, that's when I posted anyway. And the final episode was posted July 19th, 2002. And that's basically the entire series in a nutshell. It was a fan fiction series that I had created to get the teenagers with attitude, but put it in a perspective of where it was kind of lighthearted. But I, was the leader of it, and this is what I would do in that particular situation. That's what the series was. And I had some ideas of where I was going to go because when I wrote Premonitions, I had to write out brief ideas on where I was going to expand with this. So, as I said, I actually created an image that was everything that was going to happen in the series, but in an alien language. And what I had done is I had downloaded a Star Trek language pack where you can put in your word processor and write in Klingon or Cardassian or something. And I had used the Romulan font. So basically, I had written out the whole premonition, wrote 10 things that were going to happen for future plot lines I was going to set up, and then I translated it into the Romulan and had it as a JPEG file so that when you downloaded the premonition story, you would go ahead and get that as well, what I would call the prophecy. And it wasn't, it was one of those BS prophecies and stuff, but it was sent by our guy who knew what was going to go ahead and happen. And in every episode that I had, I was going to decipher what it was. Now, some of the plot points that I had, I don't remember exactly what I wrote in the premonition, but this is what was going to go ahead and be. Here were some things I was actually kind of working towards. One, I was going to work towards a relationship with Ricky and Michelle. I was going to bring those two together through circumstance where she's not interested because she's the popular girl, but they're Power Rangers and they become closer through the battles that they go through. That was the main thing I was doing there. I was going to put Shiar into a more active role and find out that she was a brainwashed alien who was working for Violex because she was basically his slave. And at some point, she would turn against Violex and the Sovereign and, help the Rangers. I had no plans on making her a Ranger on her own, but that's something that I had in mind. I had no idea what I was going to do with this guy who was sending the premonitions. I think my idea was probably he was one of the Rangers from the future. Again, I kind of got this idea from Enterprise with Future Guy helping the Suliban. That somebody was sending these cryptic messages to help somebody in the past. I kind of had the idea that he was from the future, or at least could look into the future and could not physically help them, but he was able to send them Zords and weapons and things they did not have digitally through the computer that can manifest in the real world, not unlike, say, Superhuman Samurai Cyber Squad, if anybody even remembers that as well. Now, the little teaser that I had at the end of episode 7 was supposed to be, as I said, the Sovereign was a master of genetic engineering. So the idea was that when he captured the Rangers and they were unconscious, he extracted their DNA, and that he was going to create an army of evil Power Rangers based on their DNA. That he was going to take all their aspects and turn them into his evil Power Ranger team. So the idea would be is that Ricky has to go up against himself, Jimmy has to go up against himself as a darker version. That they would have, similar powers to them, but of course not the exact same. That they would be powered by technology opposed to magic that the Mythology Rangers were, and that they would have to fight themselves, basically. But that was only the tip of the iceberg, and this is actually a plot I've been dabbling with for a bit in a couple of other stories that I've actually written for college and a few other things, was that the Sovereign was going to take the DNA of the 5 Rangers and combine them into a single character. That he would unleash this new Black Ranger against the Power Rangers. So this character was going to be called Anubis. He was, again, the Black Ranger, and he was going to be based off of the 3-headed hound Cerberus. So he would come and fight the Rangers. He has all their memories. He knows all their moves and stuff, and he can single-handedly take any of them out. He has his own Zord that was created by the Sovereign, which the visual inspiration that I had was going to come from the Hercules, Disney's Hercules version of Cerberus, the giant 3-head hound with this black with red eyes. That was kind of the idea that I had for it. and that he would fight the Rangers, but because he had the memories of the Rangers, he was able to learn compassion and look at the Rangers as his family as opposed to his enemy, and turns on the Sovereign, takes the Zord, and joins the Rangers. And so that our sixth Ranger would be, basically a combination of all the Rangers. Because here's something I don't like that they do with six Rangers. It's a very little thing, but it's just one of those things that really kind of bothers me. So, like Tommy, for example, when Tommy came into the series, he wasn't there for the first 20 or so episodes before his arrival, and all the Rangers been through the team building stuff. They went through these amazing adventures, and Tommy wasn't there. And I always imagine Tommy at the juice bar, talking to the guys, and Zach and Billy would get a conversation. Dude, do you remember the time we fought that giant pig who was trying to eat all the food in the world? And Tommy's like, uh, what adventure? Tell me about it. It's like, you had to be there and stuff. And Tommy would feel alienated that he was kind of left out. Hey, I wasn't there for that battle, and I feel like I'm excluded because I wasn't one of the original five. And I always felt that six Rangers probably had that in the back of their minds somewhere, that these guys have already been through these amazing adventures and bonded, but I'm the new guy and nobody's particularly interested in me, and they're telling all these stories about what happened before I got there and felt alienated. And I thought, what's a way you can do that without alienating the sixth ranger? I got it. Give him the memories of all the Rangers so that he knows what it's like to be there, but from five different perspectives. And that way he can easily bond with the Rangers, but have a personality unique onto his own. So that was the idea I had for the character of Anubis, is that he was going to be a combination of all the Rangers, he was going to be our new Black Ranger, and that his Zord would somehow merge with the Mythology Megazord to create a new Zord. But that his Zord was going to be its own Megazord, much like the White Tiger Zord. It had a animal form and it had a robot mode. So you had this great battle between the characters. Now, as far as any other future storylines that I had, I really didn't have anything beyond that because the next thing I was going to focus on was this thing with the Sixth Ranger and this epic battle between them and how he eventually comes over to the side of good. I did have another story idea after that. It was actually a crossover, and this is something I'm going to get into maybe in a later video. But I'll just kind of give you guys the brief rundown. Is that I actually had the idea for a second Power Rangers fan fiction team that I dubbed Power Rangers Livewire. Now, I'm not going to get into much detail about them, but think of RPM done right. That was kind of the idea I had before, long before RPM, but keep that in the back of your mind for right now. That my Rangers would actually cross over with another team of Power Rangers from another dimension, and you'd have the two teams basically bickering against each other, learning to work together, and ultimately saving the day as a team. But there is a great sacrifice at the end, and ultimately leads to the Rangers getting new Zords. Because I was going to have a second set of Zords for the Rangers that were humanoid based, but not based on their power set. And this was actually something I did right in the Premonition episode because it was something that I was trying to come up with. Because my idea was, you know what? Both these series are going nowhere. What if I combine them, meet them together, and end it basically in both series as one thing, basically. So I will get into the history of Power Rangers Livewire at another time. Right now, I don't think is most appropriate time to get into it because I've already spent over an hour talking about Power Rangers mythology. So 15 years later, what do I think about Power Rangers mythology? I think I had some interesting ideas in there that I did incorporate into things again that I wrote in college and in some other areas and all that, and things I would like to see in future superhero projects that people may go ahead and create. But to be honest, I was very uncreative in the series. I based the characters on people that I knew as opposed to creating my original characters. I think the only original character I had was the Sovereign, but again, I didn't do with him what I needed to do and take him to his full potential. Nevertheless, looking back at it, the only reason I kind of, I mean, I always remember doing it, but I never cared about it much. But I actually found a website where actually found two websites where one of them was kind of like those old forums where you would take a fan fiction idea, have people sign up and do like fan fiction blogging through message boards and all that. And somebody had actually taken my Power Rangers mythology concept and tried to actually turn that into their own, forum-based RPG adventure back when that was a thing, apparently. So they were really taking my ideas and just trying to make it their own, which I really didn't have a problem with at the time. And then not too recently, there's this page called, I think, like Cyborg Ranger page, where this guy does these little, excuse me, artistic renditions of fan fiction Power Ranger characters. And lo and behold, Power Rangers Mythology was on there with all the names, the colors, and it was based on the designs that I had on the website. So somebody saw this and decided, I'm going to do fan art of this fan fiction series, which I thought was just pretty cool. And I posted these on Facebook not too long ago, just kind of an interesting thing. Nobody was really interested in them. But you know what? I think everybody goes through a phase where they want to make their own Power Ranger team, and I'm no exception. I made this team, I made another team. They didn't work out because I didn't have the commitment, the dedication, or really the skill in which to make something of quality. But you know what? I had fun doing it. It's always fun to make your own stories and have people interested. There were a few people who were interested that downloaded the files from what I remember. There were a few comments that were left in my guest book where people were kind of interested in the project. I do remember writing a couple episodes. People were like, can't wait for the next episode and stuff. Whether they were being serious or maybe they were just like little kids or whoever and stuff like that. I just really didn't have the fan base. I mean, I got much more of a fan base with the Onyx Tavern than I ever had with Power Rangers Mythology. Um, but guys, I'm very curious. What do you think of Power Rangers mythology based on everything that I have told you here tonight? Is it something you guys would have been interested in reading at that point? Are there ideas in there that you guys like, things that you don't like? I would very much like to know what you guys think of Power Rangers mythology. I'm not looking for praise or criticism or anything. It was a fun experiment 15 years ago, and now that's obscure in the annals of the internet. I just want to know what kind of people think of it. And do you guys want me to talk about Power Rangers Livewire? Do you want to know what my ultimate plan was and what this second season or second series of Power Rangers was supposed to be about and stuff? I would really like to know what your all's opinions are on it. So leave a comment below. I'm very interested to see what the comments are for this particular video based on everything I told you guys, and I really want to know what you think. So I think I've talked enough about something that existed for a very brief period of time that's hard to find on the internet, but I hope you guys enjoyed hearing about it. Enjoy the pictures. If you want to see all the pictures or download them, they are available, I believe, on my personal Facebook account or on the Onyx Tavern Facebook page. So definitely check them out and enjoy them. But I look forward to your comments and seeing what you have to say. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys for listening. Have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.